live. Welcome back to the weekly roundup, the place where we unpack what's been going on in the yoga and the wellness industry in the world and what we've been coaching our clients through. Basically, we shoot the shit for the next hour about what we're seeing. Let's kick us off right away with a good one. Heads up, Coach Carol is spicy this morning. She's spicy.
She is so
She's
spicy.
been just lighting us up off camera.
I'm
So she's ready for it. There are some common themes and narratives, especially in the yoga world, but all the wellness world around staffing. And we always talk about how staff and managing staff is like the hidden job you didn't know you were signing up for when you first opened your studio. It's still to this day, we get that conversation where it's like, I thought I was a teacher and I had a group of peers and they were all like so supportive and whatever. And then I opened up and I realized it kind of fucking sucks to try to manage all of this. So there's like a new skill that you get to develop. That's part of being an entrepreneur. Lucky for you, yay. And the two things that have come up consistently in the last couple of weeks are around the difference between managing your team and leading your team. And I would debate that most wellness entrepreneurs, most wellness studio owners are a little bit ineffective at both of these things. They kind of conflate them into one action, and they're not actually leading and they're not actually managing. And the result is what you end up dealing with is a bunch of drama. That's how that looks like. So for you owners listening to this or managers listening to this, if you're experiencing a lot of consistent, I don't mean like one-off stuff, people are gonna people, that's normal, but like a consistent onslaught of headache and pushback and debate and conversation, it might be that they're just peopling, but if you're getting it consistent across the board, I would really take a long, hard look at, do I have a management system in place? Am I leading this group? Because if no one's leading them, like they'll lead themselves. If there's no management system in place, they'll put one in place. It just might not be the one you want. I've got some solutions for this, but Spicy Carol, I don't know. What are you what are you seeing?
Well, no, it's exactly what I experienced as a studio owner because prior to opening a studio, I was in IT. And I thought, oh my God, managing an IT team, which was the next level that I was going into, I thought, that sounds horrible. Let me go open a yoga studio. And then I hired yoga teachers, and that was a whole different beast, of like personalities and thoughts on how things should be done. So yeah, it was very eye-opening, and yes, gave me a new skill set that I wasn't quite prepared for, I think, at the time. Yeah, I'm totally seeing this with coaching clients. I actually had a client that was like, they have made it to where they're mostly working from home, and then they have their on-site managers. And we were trying to optimize all of the, in studio operations. And one of the things was like specific around cleaning the room between classes because they've got a lot of classes going on. And we as a team, me and the studio owners, came up with a solution. They took it to their managers, and the managers were like, that won't work. You're not in the studio enough to understand how things are working. And it was this huge pushback situation. It took them a month to convince the managers that this is what needed to be done. And I mean, the lesson was, well, first of all, I'm sitting here going like, why the fuck would your manager not do what your boss is fucking telling you to do? Like, okay, I'm telling you. It's that type of situation. Like, why your boss wants you to do something, like why aren't you at least giving it a try? So it's really interesting how in yoga studios, yes, we make a lot of leeway for feelings and thoughts and the ideas of our staff, when sometimes we just need to be like, this is the way I want it done. Look, if it doesn't work, I will pivot, we will change it. But like, so many studio owners are not willing to fire from dairy things. But I feel like there's just, and maybe it's because a lot of us are, female owned businesses, and we just feel like we don't have that place, or I don't know, we're not feeling confident enough or something. I don't know what it is, but lesson learned. And that studio owner was like, going forward, I'm going to remember that, because what I wanted to do actually did work. And the fact that they push back so hard on it is like, I need to remember that I do know what I'm doing. I am steering this ship. So stepping into that power is really important. And I think that's partly why you need a coach sometimes, is just to say, like, hell yeah, you know what you're doing. Let's go. And you got to put your foot down.
Hashtag Terry's dad. Your staff are your biggest asset, and they're your biggest pain in the ass.
Truth.
And it is because we're dealing with human beings, and it isn't. And I think you're right, Carol. I think and maybe it's not just female. And yes, it is female, but I have a couple of clients that are dudes, and they still experience similar issues. What I think sometimes is it's just a confidence issue. And also, we're in yoga, so we like to help people, we like to serve people, and we like to make sure people are pleased. And I think sometimes there's that line between pleasing people, and Josh, you talked about that because Carol, Josh, and I were on a call before this, is there's a difference. You can be empathetic to your staff and to your team, and at the same time hold the boundaries and space. Right. And I think that's where we get into the problem. We think that we can, if we're not, we got to give in on everything because this person is having this problem. And that's just happened with a client of mine, a newer employee. There was an issue, was supposed to be in, didn't show up, didn't call, didn't do anything. And then they're scrambling. But she did show up to teach her class, but she was supposed to come to this meeting, but so there was just a lot of this stuff. And when the owner asked the person about it, it's like, oh, I didn't think I needed to be there because this person and this person weren't going to be there. Right. And so it's like, well, no. Oh, and they can see this chat. Oh, you mean anything we put?
I'm just chatting to Mara that they can see the chat on the side. Our stream thing looks weird. Don't worry, let's keep going. What we're saying makes sense.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Close your eyes.
Did I say something bad in chat?
No, you didn't. Not yet.
Okay.
It'll happen.
Not yet, Terry.
Not yet,
Oh my
Terry.
God, don't give me a heart attack like that. It's going to be like
Hey, so
anyway,
to double down on this though, or to echo it, like there's a difference between managing and leadership, and what is happening instead of either of those things in many cases, in my experience at studio level, is we're managing, we're not leading at all, or the people are not leading at all, and they're managing the people. It's not your job to manage your employees as people. That's their job. People have to manage themselves, i.e., it's not my job to manage Mara's emotions. Mara is allowed to have her own emotional state. I can be empathetic and care and friendly and supportive, but it's not my job to actually manage them. On the other hand, management comes in as, so here's your definition. Management is management of the systems that you have in place, including the policies, boundaries, conditions, etc., and holding people to a standard inside those systems. That's what you're managing. And so you can be empathetic and tolerant of the fact that there might be something going on a personal level. Or, simple example, you've got that person under your employee and they're like, I don't like talking to people about this workshop at the front desk. We can talk about that, and there's an open conversation for us to talk about what might be happening there. But it's not my job to manage how you feel about it. We talk to people because you work at the front desk about this workshop, because that's literally the fucking definition of the job. So I'm not gonna manipulate or change or adjust the conditions of the situation. I'm not going to change the job to accommodate you, because that doesn't actually make any sense. And it's your job as the owner or the GM or whatever of the company to manage the systems and to uphold those and to hold to that standard. You actually have to do that because no one else can. So management isn't the people. Management are the systems that you put in place. If you find yourself managing the people all the time, the question you might ask yourself is there a system that they are existing within? It might be that there's a lack of system, so there isn't something for you to manage, and what shakes out is you start managing the people. Leadership, that's about leading people. That's the difference. And leadership, the best leaders create more leaders. You'll know that you are a successful leader because you will see people under your purview start to ascend in their ability to lead others. They will then lead as well. You're still not managing them, you're leading them. So then how do you do that? The two core things that leaders have to do with staff, in my mind, are you have to inspire them towards the actions that are necessary, and you have to keep them focused on the subject at hand. That's it. And maybe that's a slight oversimplification, but ultimately that's what I've seen. If you can keep your whole team focused, moving this path, and they're inspired to do the work, you're being a good leader. And if you build good internal culture, you win. Like, to be absolutely clear, fucking Alex Hermosi or someone else, who the other guy, I don't know, whatever, had said this the other day. It's not theirs. Again, this is old school, but it was a good reminder. Powerful internal culture will outperform strategy every single time, 1,000%. It doesn't, the little details that you get caught up in the weeds. Well, Carol's story, I don't think this will work because this and because that. That's getting caught in the weeds and debating the strategy. That's only a debate because the internal culture is such that that's allowable, as opposed to if you've led them and they're inspired, they'll be like, cool, let me understand why you're saying, owner, that we should do this. Here's my concern of where this could be a hiccup. Maybe we consider this. What are we solving for? And now we work together on solving the thing. And I'm not questioning your authority as the owner to say, let's do this thing anymore. Now I'm working with you to implement on this actually taking place. That internal culture component makes things easy. Anyways, internal culture, people who are focused on what needs to happen and inspired to do the work, that'll outperform strategy. Bad strategy, great culture, you win. Perfect strategy, shit culture, doesn't matter. Strategy will be irrelevant.
And I was going to say, to when you said like good leaders create more leaders, they empower, they inspire. If someone is empowered and inspired enough, because I've heard this and had conversations around this, but what if they go out and open their own business? Well, that's actually a great compliment to you as a leader and a business owner. And if that's what you're thinking about, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, you are then running your business from a place of fear. And then if you're fear-based, how can you be inspiring? So if you're inspiring, and you have that culture, and you inspire somebody so much that they want to go out and do their own thing, let them. Because if you have the internal culture, if you have everybody working towards that, then it'll just be a blip on the radar. I mean, Carol, you experienced this a bit, right? When your teacher opened up, right?
Yeah, I've had a couple of experiences, and in the beginning, it really is like painful. I think I've said before, my business partner and I looked at each other and we said, well, we must make this look easy, because everyone thinks that they can just go open up a studio and, make it work. But yeah, I think there's like early on, especially, it feels like somebody's trying to attack you in some way, because it's like, especially if it's close by. But over time, and especially when we felt more established, then it became like, okay, good luck. And we still have our focus and mission, and we feel good about our studio. And yeah, I mean, I could take it as a compliment in that way. What was coming up for me a little, to backtrack a little bit with the owners that I was talking about, is that the internal culture is so, such an interesting piece of the puzzle. And what we started to talk about was how these managers tend to come to the owners with all the problems and no solutions. And so what we talked about was something I think I've learned from Josh, was like the 1-3-1, where it's like, okay, this is the problem. I have one problem. Here are 3 possible solutions. And out of those 3, I think this is the one that's going to solve the problem. So we kind of talked about, like, to empower those managers in that way. And yes, feel like they're working collaboratively and having a say in creating better leaders. I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle. Like, don't just come to the owners with your problems. Let's figure out a solution. And so that was one of the big things we talked about implementing very soon, just as a side note, to create a little bit of that leadership. So
yeah, it's a simple, practical thing for them to just like have something to do to go through their own thought process around it. Go ahead, Mara.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just confirm that, like, we implement that 1-3-1 in our team, and it's so helpful because then it actually like takes the problem, it like really lets you identify what the problem actually is. And a lot of the times it's not even what you thought it was, it's something deeper. And then when you're coming up with the solutions, it's a really helpful tool just to even really identify what the actual problem is. Like, are we actually talking, because like most people will come with symptoms instead of the actual problem. And so like doing that really helps identify what the actual problem is. And it's really helpful.
Yeah, like 50% of solving the problem is just accurately identifying and articulating it. Or say it the old school way. It's like, if you can accurately identify the problem, you're half the way to solving it. So to Mara's point, yeah, most people are focused on symptoms. One little bit of a tangent that's related to this, and this ties in with the managing people and their emotions part too, is it's like, if you're experiencing as an owner the scenario where your management team is pushing back on everything that you ask of them, and they're coming to you with they come to you with a bunch of problems and no solutions, right? So they're thinking problem-based. They're not thinking solution-based. That's the cultural shift that has to happen. The 1-3-1 does that, where it's like it forces you into a scenario where then when you're discussing it, we're already talking about the solution, because that's the discussion that's valuable. Talking about the problem is a waste of time, other than, is it actually a problem? Is it a problem? Yes or no? Yes. Is this actually the problem, or is it a symptom? No, it's the problem. Cool. Solution. And that's where the effort is. But if you're experiencing your management team pushing back on your stuff or only coming to you with problems or whatever, one of the considerations, reading between the lines as a good leader, is that that's a symptom of entrepreneurial burnout. As you start to only see all of the weeds. It's the you can't see the forest through the trees scenario. You're so in it that all you see are all these little problems. And it's like, you'd be like, hey, I think during the sign-in process, we're going to move the iPad from this side of the desk to this side of the desk. This literally happened a couple of weeks ago. And the 2 people at the desk are like, oh, well, we can't do that. And we're like, why? They're like, well, because they like coming through that door. There's 2 doors to enter the studio. They're 10 feet apart, but they're like, but most people prefer to come through that door. So if we put the iPad on that side, they would have to come through that door and walk over here. And we're like, holy shit, like, is this ever completely missing the point of what we're trying to do here? So little detail aside, that's a sign in part for your management team, if that's who's coming at you with that stuff, of their stress level, of their burnout. They might not have identified it yet. The way that you can help to reduce stress is by leading them. Because if I'm inspired and I'm focused, then my brain isn't scurrying around going all over the place. That's a less stressful scenario and environment for me to be in. And if I'm focused on solutions and not problems, then I'm empowered because I'm solving things and moving forward in a positive direction instead of stuck in the shit mix of all the problems. Because let's be honest, in any studio, are you going to solve all the problems ever? Like literally ever? No fucking chance. Being an entrepreneur at the management and owner level, especially, all you're doing is creating more problems. You solve this and this becomes over here, and then you go to the next thing. Like there'll never not be something to solve. So you got to change your psychology around it if you don't want that to stress you out. Go ahead, Terry.
As two thoughts. One thought is one thing that can help reduce stress is you talked about management is about the system is if there's a high level of stress and they're down in the weeds, that can be the symptom of the lack of structure, lack of processes, lack of SOPs. So that's where working on SOPs, like oftentimes when you start using this method, excuse me, you'll find that problems might be around a certain thing. Like maybe it's memberships or membership cancellations. Well, is there an SOP for that? What do we do? So when you start systematizing things, it helps to solve a lot and helps reduce stress levels because then people know, okay, this, and if something comes up and you don't have an SOP for it, start writing that SOP just by what am I doing? What are the steps there? And I hear this a lot when it comes to SOPs. It's like, well, particularly if you're used to when you start out as an owner, you're basically in every seat on your bus, right? And as you start to fill your bus up, it's like, oh, it's simpler for me to just do it myself because I can do it quicker than tell somebody else. Well, the problem with that is you're never going to train anybody else. So sometimes you do just have to rip the Band-Aid off, sit down, take the time, build the SOP, train the person, and then, wow, whew, that's done. And then a final thing, just before I pass it back to you, and talked about leadership and entrepreneurship, is I had a conversation with a client yesterday. He was feeling a bit overwhelmed, newer client, and lots of things on his we call it action item. Some people call it their homework list, and he was feeling really stressed about the fact he hadn't gotten his homework done. I said, first off, you're not going to get flunked or anything like that for not getting your homework, and you've had these other things happen. He decided to switch softwares, which kind of put everything on the back burner. And then I said to him, I also want you to keep in mind that as an owner, business owner, your to-do list is never done. Because as soon as you move some things off, like you said, you've solved this problem, you've done this thing, now you're onto this thing. And he said, wow, I never thought of it that way. I said, let's look at it this way. The only time you're going to be completely finished with your to-do list is when you're dead, and then it's not going to matter, right? And he got a laugh like that too. But that for him, me just saying that to him helped reduce his stress,
right?
By just acknowledging that there is a never-ending to-do list when you own a business. I imagine, I don't have kids, but with a family, there's probably a never-ending to-do list when it comes to your family and your kids and all those kind of things as well. So the to-do list just helps you prioritize what needs to be done so you can take it out of your brain and put it on a list. Josh.
Well, side note, one of the ways to get rid of a to-do list, don't put things on it. I know that sounds weird, but it's like if you're going to sit down to do work for the day, put 3 things on your to-do list and just do those 3 things. That's how you don't have an ever-growing to-do list. Tomorrow you'll put 3 more on there. I'm not saying that's exactly the right technique, but like there is a thought around focus here, hence the leadership part, where it's like if you know that your to-do list will never nullify completely, you'll never have a day where you're like, there's just nothing to do. Like that's just not a thing that's going to happen. If you know that's true, then the question isn't how do I get rid of all the things on my to-do list? The question is, how do I work on the 20% of things that are on my to-do list that are the highest impact and inspiration for me? How do I have the highest impact possible? And I'm not wasting my time doing a bunch of shit that either doesn't matter or matters very minimal.
Well,
Backing it, go ahead.
I would say we also have a rule that we work with in the YC too, is like we used to have, like if we were working on something in our a task list or whatever, and we said, okay, well, it's not getting done, and we would like parking lot it or backlog it. And we finally just came up with a rule, is there's no more parking lot or backlog. It's like, okay, if this is on our list to do and we're not getting it done, then that means we don't need to do it. So let's just get it off the list.
Just
it's
delete
done.
it.
Delete it. Or is there something in here this is maybe not defined right or defined correct? It's not the right, to Mara's point, it's not the actual thing that we're solving for. So that's the other thing is like, if it's like, you're not gonna get it off the list, it's done. And I
Yeah.
think that's
Well,
helped us as a team to move our team forward is like, it's like we either solve it. Is it happening? Yes or no? No, it's done. Boom.
yep. The thing that put my mind at ease, and Mara and I went really deep on list prioritization and put a system in place and stuff like that, and it puts my mind at ease, whether we use it perfectly or not, just having a plan. The stuff that you delete, we used to parking lot it or punt it to later because we thought that then we would get to this place where we'd be like, okay, we're done the stuff. Let's go look at that list and bring it back on here. And that never happened. Not one time in 5 years did we ever fucking go to the like parking lot shit and be like, better pull this back in here. It never fucking happened. On the other hand, if
Not
something
once.
actually, not once, if something actually matters enough that you needed to do it and you deleted it, it'll just fucking hit you in the face. It just comes back up by itself. You don't have to do it. So you don't need to manage the list that way. Anyways, that put my mind at ease. Unless, Terry, in our team, we do have the magic Josh, like the top secret magic Josh's list that Mara put stuff on, which I don't know where it exists. I just tell her, put
It's
this
just
down
the
somewhere.
magic list.
And she puts it somewhere. I've never seen
Yeah.
it. I know that it
Bippity
exists somewhere.
boppity boop it.
Well,
Yeah.
we also have a thing called an issues list. So this is where the 131 comes into play. It's like if something comes up and we're not sure, we're stuck in how to do it, and it's something that doesn't have to be done like today, right? It's like we put it on the issues list. Here's the issue. This is what I'm thinking. And then as a team, we can discuss it and come up with a solution. Again, sometimes the thing on the issue isn't actually the issue. We identify other issue, so that's
Yeah.
another effective strategy is that use that issues list for things that
Yeah.
you need to discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So-
while we're, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary.
While we're on the strategy topic here, like we have another strategy that like, because we do weekly sprint meetings. And so if a task is not getting done by a person, say it's like week 2 has gone by, they get a ×2 on that task. And then the next week, if they're still not done it, they get a ×3. And as soon as it gets to ×3, then they get a reality check. And it's like, okay, let's check in. Like, why is this not getting done? Do you not understand what this full task entails? Is it too much? Do we need to break it down? Do you need to delegate? Like, what's going on? And that really also helps identify other problems or things that would be better off, like making an SOP and
Yeah.
delegating it to one of your team members. You're like just not
Josh
getting
just
around to
says,
it, or maybe it's not important. You just say,
or Josh just says, Terry, fucking do it tomorrow.
Right.
yeah,
Which
it could
has
be.
happened.
It could be one
Which
of those
is-
really mundane things, and you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, it's so
Yeah.
easy to do it later,
Yeah.
and then it later never comes.
But that's super useful as a team because it's a non-offensive thing. It happens to me the most of anyone, I'm sure. Like, just fucking, why is this not happening? I don't know. Like, is it the wrong person doing it? No. Is it the wrong task? No. Does it matter? Yes. Is there something blocking you from doing it? No. Like, I just fucking haven't gotten to it. Well, just fucking do it then. Okay. That's valuable. Backing us up to the manager thing and the stress and all of this, keep in mind this concept that whatever you focus on expands. And so if your management team is coming at you with resistance and problems, they're focusing on that stuff and that stuff is expanding for them. Therefore, if you start trying to manage their emotions by playing into that, you also expand it and the whole thing gets worse. And that's the tricky part being a leader, that you actually can't let them pull you into the schlog of the weeds of all the little shit that like it's not solution based. So as soon as you do that, You're playing into their emotional state and you're starting to manage them, not the system. And you're not leading them around the larger picture of what's happening. And they won't pull themselves out of it in many cases. That's a very skilled person that can do that. They need someone to lead them to do it. That someone is you. Different subject, similar here. Carol and I were talking about this in our last on-site too. This has come up a few times. As an owner, there is a time and place with your team, of course, especially, but even with your community, where you would give context for why you're doing something. On the other hand, it seems to be a missed thing that I found myself saying in the last couple of weeks a lot. You do not have to explain yourself and why you're doing something in your own business. Example, if you're going to increase your prices $5, you can fancy up the delivery of that and stuff, but you don't actually have to explain it. You don't need to send a message. It's like the price of gas has gone up, and then with cookies and, well, you know, like, and this big, huge hoopla explanation for increasing your prices $5 or $10. You could just send out a message that says, as of this date, prices go from this price to this price. Good day, period. Now, that's a little dry and shitty, but you don't have to explain yourself, is my point. That's the thing, that owners seem to feel like they need to explain themselves. And this goes back to, Carol, what you were saying with the, like, how does an employee just be like, well, no, I'm not going to do that? What plays into that and makes it expand is then you feel like you need to explain yourself, sort of thing. Maybe you need to explain why you're doing something to your employees, but you don't need to explain yourself. You can just make decisions and just do it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to your point, Josh, about this is just sort of a tip about prices and raising prices. Two thoughts. One, if you raise your prices on a regular basis, then you don't get stuck in the thing where you haven't raised your prices for 5 or 6 years. And now you need to, it's like, to bring it up to where you need it to be, you're raising membership prices up 20, 30, $40 a month. So if you take regular annual or 18, whatever the cadence is, regular price increases on your packages and memberships, then it's not as daunting as, oh my God, I haven't done anything. And then another tip is, if your membership agreement is written in a way that says we reserve the right to raise prices and will notify you 30 days prior to a price increase. That way, you don't have to, when you do raise a price, you don't have to sell them a new contract and they have to sign a new membership agreement. If you have that simple language in the contract, is we reserve the right to raise prices, and when we do so, you will be notified 30 days via email. And then boom, then if they want to cancel, they can cancel, but you can raise the price without having to go into your software and do all these back end things and making sure people sign their membership agreement and all of that good stuff. So that's just pro tip. Mary, you would look like you want to say something.
I don't know how to raise my hand on Zoom and everybody can see what I'm doing. So if I'm looking for it, it's going to be really obvious. Anyways, just piggybacking off of what you said, Terry, that's a really good point. And it's kind of similar to the situation, like, you want to pay attention to who's giving you pushback, because those are clearly like your problem children of the studio, right? And then you know how to deal with it in a different way, because it doesn't matter if it's an issue coming from your prices are increasing and your teachers or your desk staff have issues with it, or you're moving an iPad from one place to another, because the people who are like constantly blocking these decisions and making you second guess yourself, that's a bigger issue. It's like, well, why are you pushing back on this? Like, why? Because most of the time too, like when you're making these changes, you're making them for a reason. And maybe you just need to explain it better and like explain the bigger picture and have your team bought in that way. And yeah, like I've seen that, or I'm not a coach, but like I've seen it happen a lot in many businesses, and that it takes a minute to like get everybody bought into the big picture. And it's important to identify like, well, why are you pushing back? And like, and then figuring out like, is this actually a symptom or is this actually a problem? And then like talking about that and discussing that.
Mara, I was going to say that just prompted me to go back to this thought of like managing their emotion and stuff around things. You're correct in that if your managers are pushing back on something, let's use the price raise as an example, because it makes sense as a good leader to explain the bigger picture and thought behind why you're making a decision to do something. And you don't have to explain yourself in that, like, this isn't a debate. It's not a democracy either. You know, like by me telling you we're raising prices, I wasn't asking you to tell me that you don't want us to raise prices. Now, if you have a real problem with it and you have a legitimate identified 131 level problem for why we wouldn't do this, and you're coming up with a solution or whatever else, then I can listen to that. And it's my prerogative to not do anything about it. But to your point, what ends up happening when you get the pushback from your management team on something like raising prices is they think that they're telling you, I don't like the idea of raising prices because this student and that student and this student and this reason. But what's actually happening in most cases, in my experience on the ground at studios, is what they're saying is, I emotionally feel uncomfortable with my fear of the conflict that will come up because you raised prices. And I know Terry's going to come in and be like, you raised prices on me again. And I don't want to have to deal with that. That's actually what they're saying, but they can't articulate that. And so to your point, Mara, it's like, that's actually where the discussion is. And that might sound like, well, it's really interesting, Mara, that you don't like this idea that we're raising prices. Explain to me where that's coming from. Like, what is the feeling that you are having or the fear that you are having around us raising prices that's strong enough that right now you're saying, let's not raise prices? What is that? And I can almost guarantee that in 80-90% of cases, that question will really give pause because they haven't thought about it. They're just word vomiting on you, and because they're just reacting out of emotion. You want to get really into the psychology, the emotion has a core thought behind it. The core thought is increasing prices makes things less accessible and affordable, therefore is bad and incongruent with whatever else. And it's like, that's not even necessarily true. But like, they haven't unpacked or thought of any of that. But that's actually the discussion to be had.
Yeah. And it's funny, like when you flip the script and you're like talking about something as simple as moving the iPads from this part of the desk to this part, then it gets a little like, oh yeah, that's really not that big of a deal. You know, like
Objectively, the objective reality is like, it's a fucking 10 there or there, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't actually matter. It
Yeah.
matters for the system of like, we want a flow to go here and a flow to go here, and therefore we're doing this. But the person pushing back on it, it's a good example, Mara, because the couple people who pushed back on it at first, we had a little bit of this discussion, but what they were actually saying, if we really read between the lines, and you would have to ask them and check, what they're actually saying is, our regular members who normally come through that door and normally come over here, and I'm going to stand here, are going to give me the stink eye when they come in because they have to sign up over here. And Carol is the member who comes through and is like, you got me right, thanks, see ya, and just fucking takes off. And I don't want to have to cause conflict and be like, Carol, sorry, you've got to sign in. So it's my fear of the conflict and the confrontation and the stink eye from Carol that's actually the problem. Moving the iPad is irrelevant. It's not even the problem itself. And that's tricky because studios, that's the nature of the whole thing, that there's like this apologeticness that doesn't need to be there.
Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, talking about it takes some groundwork to get the buy-in from the team. And if you can do that and do it well, you can move the iPad without an issue. You can make changes to prices without, much pushback. So, I mean, and that's the fine line of how much information do I give? How much, I'm thinking back to my Monday minutes. I really felt like that was a huge, benefit to our team when they because I was just kind of giving them the big picture every week. And, but it is that hard part where like, how much do you tell them so that you're getting buy-in and they understand the bigger picture without asking for feedback in a way that's like, I mean, I want to be open and I want to be open to suggestions. At the same time, I can stand firm with my decision as the owner and they can respect that. So it's sort of, you have to have that groundwork beforehand, or long term in order to have that kind of relationship with the staff. That's what I was thinking.
That's a great point, Carol. And also, if you really do want to solicit feedback on something, on a change in the studio, then say, hey, team, this is what I'm really looking for some feedback on this. This is how you get buy-in. This is also how you inspire and lead, is if you have this idea and you're not sure, you do have a team who can help you, give you inform. I'm soliciting feedback. I'm soliciting ideas so that I can figure out what's the best way forward. So there is absolutely a time and a space to solicit feedback. The other thing I just cracked up, Josh, when you said this is not a democracy, because hashtag Terry's dad, whoever said this was a democracy, this is a benevolent dictatorship, and you don't have a vote, and you don't have a vote. I heard that so many times growing up. That just cracked me up. And then I was going to say one other thing about if you are getting, and we've seen this at on-sites, and we've seen this just even in our Zoom coaching calls, is if you are getting consistent pushback, it always seems to be from typically one or two individual. Oh my gosh, you've got double trouble there, Mara. It always seems to be from the same people typically. And if that's the case, then maybe that person is just not a good fit for your business. Whether they've been with you for 5 minutes, 5 years, or 50 years, and I hear that a lot. Oh, but they've been here for so long. And oftentimes that's when we see it. It's like when an owner's been in business a while and starts working with us as a coach and really starts to take ownership of their business, they oftentimes will get pushback from longer term tenure teachers who maybe feel displaced. And then that's where they can get, and then it's like, well, sometimes the best solution is to part ways. And we've seen that as well, Josh.
Well, or there's the conversation that has to be had around the communication and what the boundaries are of that with that person. On one hand, it's a positive indicator that they've been around long enough that they feel that their opinion matters enough that they're going to voice their opinion, including in displeasure, and there's no resentments being built up. That's a really good thing. So that's not inherently negative. On the other hand, if someone really cares and is really loyal to the brand and the business, not just themselves, and really wants to see the ultimate success, like they say, then wouldn't it be professional and even just very human of them to empathetically approach it in a positive way? Because there's a completely different thing between like, oh, well, that's not going to work. I don't want to do that. That's stupid. And being like, hey, Terry, this is a really good idea. I have 2 or 3 concerns that I really want to voice to you about this because this is what I'm seeing on the ground. And here's why I think they matter. Like, if you're professional enough to have that discussion, we'll sit down and talk about any fucking thing you want. I have infinite time for you. If you're just like, well, no, I don't want to do that, or that's stupid, or I don't like this, or what about this, and just complaining, and you've got no solution, and you can't even communicate professionally, and you're just pushing back on everything, then the discussion is totally, I'm not even talking about the thing anymore. Then we're talking like, Terry, look, dude, I like working with you, and this is great. Every time we try to implement a change, it feels like there's resistance or like you're not happy with this. And I don't want anyone working with me that's not happy. What's happening? Like, I'm changing the whole parameters of what we're talking about now. What's going on? And that's the part ways thing that they're like, there's probably some other deeper whatever thing going on that either is solvable or is not solvable. The not solvable things are like, I don't believe in the vision, mission, direction of this business. Okay, I can respect that you as a person have that opinion. Then this probably isn't the place for you to work. No hard feelings.
And I think one of the trickiest, I feel, transitions to make is when, because I say this because I was in this position, is when you're teaching at a studio. And so then you're peers with all the other teachers and even friends with some of the other teachers. Then you buy the business, and now all of a sudden you've transcended to being their boss, the leader. And that can be a tricky process to navigate, because now it's like, and then if then it's like, how much do you share now with your bestie? Because it's a whole different, so that can be a tricky thing to navigate as well. So just sort of putting that out there, that is a reality of the situation when you, and even, or if you start a business and you have a bestie and then they come work for you, right? There is that line between the personal and professional. And so being able to have that conversation with people, and saying, I know we're best friends, however, this is the new reality. And I just, you got to check in with them, because that can be a really tricky thing to navigate.
Well, you're not their friend. I
You're
mean,
not
if they're
their-
previously your friend, and to say that there's no rules that like I would say Mara and I are friends because we've been doing business together long enough and we have a relationship outside of work. But like generally speaking, in your work environment, there's a false belief that gets inherited in the yoga world, especially, but not just yoga world, all the wellness world, where it's like, I need to be friends with all the people that are here that I'm working with as their boss. No, you don't. And in fact, it completely disempowers you if you are. It doesn't mean you can't be ever and that you can't be friendly. That's not the same thing as being their friend. You need to be their leader. And so
Yeah.
think about anyone that's a mentor or a leader for you personally, if you've ever experienced it. Like they have a relationship with you that creates an accountability and an inspiration and an educational situation that if it was actually just like a best friend, couldn't happen. It's a different
Yes.
relationship.
Yeah, I really like that. That's a really good point. And also the friend who's not the owner, if they're really your friend, they're going to respect you in this new role and support you, right? Like if they start to try and take advantage of the situation, like that's just a shitty friend. And they're not really actually your friend. Like they're just, which is a hard reality, but that is sometimes what happens. But if they are really truly your friend, they're going to respect you in that role and empower you
Yeah.
and be proud of you and support you in any way that they can.
Well, Mara, to your point, like this is where it gets weird. It can get real tricky, right? Like if our friendship is predicated on a quid pro quo that you will also treat me a certain way in our work environment, then are we really friends? And so that's, I know there's a lot of words in there.
There's a lot to unpack
Wait, what?
there.
It's just, like our friendship, if we're truthfully friends, should have conditions that are only relative to our friendship, not our work environment.
Yeah.
If I'm
And
doing
you
my
have
job
different
and you're doing your
hats.
job.
Yeah, and like you have different hats. Like when you're in work, you have your work hats on and you work in a respectful way. And then when you're outside of work, you have your friend hats on.
Yep. Terry, what was the other thing that came up? Let's end it off for today, but there was one other thing that was related to this. You're muted.
Before we got on the call.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's related, kind of going back to price changes, because we were talking about pricing, and then what came up, this come up with for me recently is, I'm a coach to people, we have that relationship, and in the YC, we have a specific way that we coach and a program that we coach towards based upon best practice, all of these things. And that's not to say that there aren't other ways to do things. And so what came up is that working with a client about pricing, and we agreed on a strategy, and then another coach that she knows was like, oh no, that's completely wrong, you shouldn't do this. And so it just sort of created doubt on the pricing strategy. And so there were two things. One was about a client who were reviewing pricing. Somebody said, if she heard in a podcast, that you shouldn't have an unlimited at all because it devalues, there's no sense of urgency, which I thought was really interesting. And then the other one was because this studio was on not really large. I mean, it was in like sort of like a 20 to 22%, 22, I think it's 22 person capacity. Many of their classes are full with wait lists. Members are complaining they can't get into class. So we adjusted their pricing to make an unlimited membership a real premium price. So you really do have to come a lot to make it that more of a value. And then we put in an 8-class card as sort of that mid-tier. So that's good if you're practicing twice a week. And somebody said, oh, well, why would you limit somebody to practicing? But it's like the problem we were solving for, the person didn't have all the information. So it's just, we just got in this whole conversation about pricing. And then I asked Carol, I said, Carol, if you were to open a studio today, how would you price? And she said, spicy girl.
I said I'd probably do a weekly, and pretty much nothing else.
Yeah.
Not a drop-in, not an intro, just a weekly membership, hop on, hop off, whatever. Seems to be really, I don't know, practical and successful for a lot of studios these days. Yeah, I had another thought. I think I was, hold please. My spicy brain.
Your spicy brain.
Hold please, hold please. Yeah, I like the idea of the weekly or credits. If it was me, those are the two systems I'd be heavily looking at. Just because you either need to price classes dynamically to maximize margin over time, and you want to dissociate the price with the class specifically because it creates the wrong conversation. Not dissociate, hide, dissociate, like change the conversation to just be practice. And the weekly thing is just simplify everything. You're in or you're out.
The weekly membership really works for my brain personally. It makes sense in girl math. Like it's a good membership. I wish that all the studios where I live did weekly memberships. I'd sign up for everything.
Yeah, and then, especially with click to cancel pushing towards the self-cancellation thing being, the dominant way of cancellation, which we've been coaching towards forever anyways. And actually there's an example of what you're talking about, Terry. I'll come back to that. But like, if I can just hop on, hop off, now our entire conversation is just practice yoga and what are you trying to get out of it? Like, that's what I'm an expert in. Let's do that part. The different opinions thing. So the Yogapreneur method, right? The business method that we've developed over more than a decade across over 1,000 studios at this point, which we've seen at double, triple, quadruple studios in a couple of years of time. Like, I'm totally tooting my horn here, but like, we know that this shit works. It still isn't a one size fits all templatized, just do exactly this, because that's not how the world works. It's a framework based off of best business practices that have been very proven. We adjust it over time. And it requires a critical thinking mindset. There is no one way to do something. There's 10 ways that you could do the same thing. They might all work. The question becomes, and it's where when we get the feedback of like, well, I heard this or this other coach said that, it's no shade on them. They're actually right. Like, oh, you don't want to limit people coming by having an 8 time a month. You're right. You don't want to necessarily create a limitation on people coming. But the thing that's missed in the conversation is, what the fuck are you solving for? Like, why do anything? You need to have a reason behind it to either solve a problem or create a bigger new situation. And if that's there, then there might not be a wrong answer. The things that we would not normally recommend, there are conditions that if specific things are met, we're like, this is in fact the best option, The 8 times a month, I don't think that it's a good pricing model for the vast majority of studios to have a 4 times a month, 8 times a month, 12 times a month, unlimited a month. That's stupid. They compete with each other. But if you have a limited capacity and a bunch of people on an unlimited who are now complaining because they feel like they're being shorted, and you need to increase the inventory in your business. Selling a group of people an 8-time-a-month pass effectively doubles your inventory every week on that group, increases your average price per class, lowers the price per month that a certain group is paying, so they're less likely to cancel. And if they can get their 2 in, they got their money's worth and they're happy. It's solving a specific problem. So this whole like, as soon as anyone says, this is a hard rule, never do this, never do that, bullshit. Like, except for you don't sell drop-ins. Like, just never sell a drop. That's, if you say drop in first, you're fired. That's the one, that's just a universal truth.
Well, and that, to Carol's point, I mean, I really like this idea of like, just don't sell drop-ins. Like before, I sold my studio before the pandemic hit, like towards the end of like 2018, 2019, studio was buzzing. It was humming, classes full with wait lists. I actually took a cue. I think she got this idea from you, Josh, is I took the drop. I didn't effectively stop selling the drop-in, but I took the drop-in off the website so that people couldn't book. And I was with Mind Body. So if they wanted to book a class, they either need to, if they were new, they needed to buy my intro or buy another package. They couldn't just buy a drop-in to take class. Now,
Yeah.
if somebody was visiting, they wanted to come in and take a class and there was space, we would sell it to them. Right. So I just eliminated the drop-in, and I was going to this other, it's a franchise, like Hit Gym thing last year. And they only offered a weekly membership. That was it. It was either a 3-month or a 6-month
Yep.
commitment. Now their cancellation process sucked, it'll be interesting to see what they do with the click to cancel. Because nothing's done on the website. Everything has to be done at the studio. They are really OG. It's like you sign up for the membership of the studio, you have to come in to cancel your membership, all that jazz. But anywho, but it was pretty simple. It's like, you want to be a member here are the options. 3-month commitment, 6-month commitment, weekly only. And you saved, I think you saved like, I don't know, I think you saved a few dollars a week. I think it worked out to about maybe $15 a month you saved if you committed to the 6-month. So to Carol's point, I kind of like that idea. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think the drop-in, the non drop-in situation, we've talked about this for a while. First off, that recommendation. Here's an example of how our methodology has changed. Up until 2019, most studios, we would coach them in that direction. Take your drop-in off your online store. Advertise it on your site and say in studio only or call me. But people didn't pre-register for classes at the same rate. 50% plus of your class, in most classes 60-80%, were just walking in and then signing up for the class. So that made sense then. We switched that because behavior changed. And so you could still do that. I like that idea now. It's a bit old school. But if your classes are full, and you don't want to have people doing a drop-in, you want to funnel them towards something else, make it hard to buy the drop-in. Make them call you. And then at least you have the discussion sort of thing.
Or don't sell the drop-in, and like you said, sell them something else. It's like, you want to practice. This is how we roll. Particularly, particularly if you're again, this is where there's no one size fits all. Particularly if you're at a space or a studio where you are, and we have several clients in this category where they're like 80% full, 80% of the time, right? And you don't want to be selling, and so. Then it's just like, okay, we don't do drop-ins. If you want to find out about us, sign up for our thing, whatever the thing happens to be.
Well, it's weird. There was a brand recently that sent this huge email in response to some coaching that I had given one of their clients on being like, well, we want to sell more drop-ins because that gives us the highest price per class. So let's try to sell more. And I was like, holy cow, are you ever missing the whole point of like a yoga studio? That's the F45 model. It's just optimized for dollars per person on the floor. But is that congruent with your business ethics and what you're trying to create and the community you're trying to build? And often probably not. But the other thing about drop-in that's interesting in the pricing discussion right now, and Carol, you travel around quite a bit too. Curious your thought on this. Carol and I were talking about going to New York recently. And so it makes me think of it in New York. Yeah, well, you're traveling too. Not us going to New York. She's got to go and Just gonna go watch Beyonce. But anyways, the point is here, like drop-ins have pushed up really high. And look, I am the first person to be like, make your drop-in impossibly expensive. Keep pushing it up as high as your market can possibly handle. And at the same time, on the consumer side, it's like, I don't want to fucking pay a $50 drop-in to take a yoga class. Like I would actually personally, if it was $50, I would just not take the class. That would deter me from doing the class altogether. So there is a limit somewhere where like drop-ins can't go any higher. And I don't think we've reached it yet because there's still crazy yoga studios selling fucking $15 drop-ins like boneheads out there. But we're at $30. I've seen 35. You 35 plus a mat and a towel rental at $5. Now we're at $40 for a
45.
single class,
I've
right?
tried that's at 45 in Southern California.
Right. So no problem with that, but just it can't go any higher at some point. Like it starts to get weird. So that you have to actually change the model to change that equation now. Where it's like you have to not sell a drop-in, you have to sell a 24-hour pass instead of a drop-in, or you got to sell a weekly membership instead of a drop-in. Because, or like basically effectively not have a drop-in anymore, because otherwise it stops making any sense.
Oh, here's a solution. You just made me think. Here's a solution for ClassPass. If all you had was a weekly membership, and then you had a drop-in that was ridiculously high, and ClassPassers, then you would get a really, if you don't have a 10-pack, but then the only thing ClassPass could take the price off of would be your drop-in. That could solve for if you still want to do ClassPass. That's one way I think these can sort of like work around the game the algorithm. Is all you had was a weekly membership.
Carol, how much is a drop-in for dance class? Or is it even a thing?
I mean, it is, and it's pretty low here, I would say. Like, I'm surprised at some of them. Like, one is $18 for an hour and a half class. But then I have one that's 25 for only a 60-minute. And I have to say, like, the people that I dance with for the $18 class are not going to the $25 class because they don't feel like they're getting their bang for their buck, 60 minutes, it's a lot higher. I don't know. It's an interesting.
How do dance?
And they're only buying a drop-in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's the other option for them to buy?
What's the other pricing?
10 class pass.
Hmm.
I think you can get a 5 maybe as well, but I think most people go for a 10-pack. So you do get, some kind of deal off of the drop-in from those, but also these are usually adult dancers and our schedules are kind of crazy. Of course, if you're like a teenager and you're taking monthly, like 7 classes a month, like they have a monthly payment. So it is a little bit different when you're, on a competition team or something like that and taking regularly.
But isn't the reason I asked this question is it's a good example of like different industry similar. We see this in an extreme way, like in therapy, because we have a couple therapy clients that we work with as well that have therapy studios, different types. And their entire mentality, the way they talk about it internally, the way they pay their therapists, the way they present it to their clients is per session. You pay $200 per call, per session, per whatever, all the time. Terry's just all over the flying emojis today. Same thing with dance. It's like, it's an indicator of how you could be disruptive in that industry with your pricing, where it's like the entire conversation is value per dance lesson instead of the program of dance lessons as an adult or the ongoing. Because correct me if I'm wrong, often dance studios as well, it's like they have a start and end to a season of sessions too. As opposed to, but if you own a dance studio and you're going to be open 12 months of the year, like there is opportunity for there to be this thing where it's like buy the 10 classes or sign up for some annualized or monthly thing and come in when you can, because we're going to be here and I'm going to need people in those classes and I want you to be more committed than a single session. Like your pricing communicates all that. So
yeah, that's
Go ahead.
It's a really interesting point. Like Josh, you and I have talked about how my lash studio, I have a subscription. And like normally any kind of service-based business like massage, chiro, all of that, like it's all per session. And I don't know if it's just me, but like I very much limit how often I go for massages because I have to pay $120 every single time. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And same with my lashes. So like when it's on a subscription, there was a chiro studio or chiro office here that offered massage and they had a massage subscription. And like you save $20 a month too when you sign up for the subscription and you just book your massages whenever you want, or like you can pre-schedule them for the whole year. And same with my lashes. I just go whenever I want. I go every 2 weeks and I don't have to think about it. I sleep on my face, like everything, because I just know I'm going every 2 weeks and I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about paying for it. It just comes off my credit card. Like
Let's
there's
unpack this. It's such a brilliant example. Let's unpack this, right? Because
Yeah.
why do you get your lashes done? What does that do for you personally?
I can wake up and just feel like I look super pretty.
Right. So there's an aspirational identity. The problem that's solved is you having to do your own lashes, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I don't know enough about lashes to talk about this super articulately, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you like this product and it solves something that you wanted to solve and it does something positive for you. And if you're paying by the session, then every single time you go to do it, you have to think, oh, I've got to pay again. So if you
And I
look
have
over
to
at,
pay out of my bank account too. I guess I could pay by my credit card,
right.
but I'm
Well,
more conscious of my
You're
money.
more conscious of making the payment.
right.
Mhm.
There's an insinuation and an advantage to you to not to extend as long as possible between last sessions because you'd have to pay every time. And so theoretically, like over a 12-month time horizon, you get your lashes done, let's call it 8 times. Or if we're doing monthly, sorry, 16
You have
times.
to do every max stint is 4 weeks, Josh, for lashes.
Okay, 12. You do it 12 times in a year.
Yeah.
But now because you're on an
It's not-
auto pay thing, it actually incentivizes you to make sure you take advantage of it. So now instead of 12, you do 24 times in a year. You're totally happy. You save per session. So the math is I'm getting a better deal, but your lifetime value over a 12-month time horizon to them is almost double instantly.
Yeah.
Like it just makes perfect sense. I don't know. This is
I don't
where
know why
people,
everybody
It's just-
people don't buy your pricing, but your pricing communicates what they should do for your
Yeah.
product.
I've tried to tell my cleaning lady, like, you should set up subscriptions so you don't have to remind me to pay you every month or every time you come.
Yeah.
And she's like, that's a thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, let's sit down. I'll help you out because I don't want to do this.
Well, think about the therapy office we work with. Now, therapy, look, there's some other like ethics boards that they have to abide by. There are rules for the state that they're in. There are other components. So if you're a therapist office listening to this, yes, I understand there's more details in this. But the theory here, right? Thanks, Carol. The theory here is if every time I do a session of therapy with you, which we're talking about an extreme scenario, I might really need it. It might be emergency level. I need support. I need to talk to someone, whatever. I have to think, oh, I'm going to pay. And you have to think, like, imagine as a therapist, you're highly schooled, maybe very experienced. You know you can help someone. And I'm on a session with Mara and I'm like, holy shit, we should meet again this week because what's happening for you right now is such that that would be the best thing. But now I don't just get to say to you, let's meet again. I have to sell you another session. Hey, Mara, let me charge you another $200 this week and let's meet again in 2 days. And you have to say yes to that. So there's all this friction built into it versus if they're just on a quote membership subscription style model where it's like, hey, we meet weekly. And if there's a moment where you need an extra call or whatever, it's just fucking built in. Just jump on and let's solve the problem because I'm here to help you. And that's my core focus, not trying to get you to do as many sessions as possible to take your money.
Yeah. It literally changes so many things. It's a game changer when you have a membership with stuff like that.
Well, Starbucks app. I mean, it's just like
I don't
same
know if you
thing.
would consider that a membership.
Yeah,
I mean, if
it
you
was.
think
It is.
it
It
is a
is.
member.
Actually, yeah, you can turn on auto reload, which I
When
do.
you turn on auto renew, it's really becomes a membership, because that's why I've written
That's
a couple
very true,
posts
yeah.
about it. Is you don't it as soon as you get below $10, and you can decide you want it to be
Yeah, you
25,
can.
50, or 100. So I have it at 25. I'm like, oh, it's $25, right? So
Oh, I was
as
looking at
soon as it
hundo.
goes below 10, it automatically renews for the next amount. And and I'm not, as I say, I'm not buying 2, 3. I'm buying $4, $5, $6 drinks. So that could go pretty quick. So anyway, it's like, but yeah, it's because I don't think about it. And
Yeah.
if you ask
Well,
me
and
why do I go to Starbucks?
why do that?
They're
Like,
not
why would
really
Starbucks do
paying
that?
for it.
Why
It's
would
free.
Starbucks do? Because you don't, it's the same thing. You don't think about it.
Right. It's dissociating price from the action, which there's some
Right.
ethics here you've got to be careful with in pricing, right? But from a business sense, there's a few. One is stickiness. If I have investment into Starbucks, then I strategize going to Starbucks. Literally, there can be a coffee shop across the street and a Starbucks 5 blocks away. But if I have $100 credit on my app, I'm going to walk to Starbucks instead of going to the place across the street. And they know that.
They know
Yeah,
that.
they know
There's a
that.
local coffee shop right across the street.
Right.
I don't go, I rarely go there because, one, they don't even take credit cards.
Yeah.
It's
Come on.
cash or check. And
Ohio, come on.
it's like, I don't carry, I haven't carried a checkbook in probably since the early aughts.
Wait, did you say they take checks?
Checks.
Well,
Checks.
I would bet anyone $1,000 that they lose thousands of dollars a year in bounce check shit and fees and stuff like that.
Either
Of
that,
just like
well,
false.
I don't know,
Coffee
maybe,
in a check.
not, because they also serve food. I wouldn't say, maybe, I wouldn't say it would be that high because of the area the area they serve. So it's like, it's in
Mindful.
Oakwood, Ohio, which is a small, these demographics, socioeconomic is
Who
really
even
high.
has checks?
I know.
That's
I don't think
that's the
I
real
own
question.
checks.
But
I own checks from when I
No,
was
in
13
Canada,
years old.
Mara, in Canada, you have to pay to get checks. Your bank will give you a checkbook, but you have to pay them for it.
Yeah, you do. I
Yeah,
still
well,
have a
they have to
checkbook
pay the
from when I
printing
was
costs.
13 when I opened my bank account.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
I'm
Right.
little.
Usually-
So, but you
businesses-
have investment in the business,
Right.
so you're
Yeah.
sticky and you choose them over it. Here's the other thing. This is like payment processing is like this too. Starbucks also, and they've gotten some flack for this recently. They have hundreds of millions of dollars sitting held in these accounts. And because of their volume and investment potential, the money sits in investment accounts earning interest. So they're actually functioning as a bank where they're using your money to gain interest money in their banking system because they're holding onto it. Like they make, I can't remember what the stat is, but whatever, tens or hundreds or millions of dollars a year in interest because people put money on the Starbucks app.
I hadn't thought about that.
It's an amazing
that's
fucking thought.
That's a smart business move. I don't know. Like,
Although, as I
they're
posted
the
below,
shit.
that is actually because the mobile order took over. This is an interesting thought too, and I've been their
Space is gone. Yeah.
their spaces are going. So the new CEO is, I just posted an article in the group about this, about becoming a third place. Because for so many years, Starbucks was the third place, meaning your first place is your home, your second place is your office. They wanted to be the third place. People would come, have coffee, hang out. Well, one of the things they found with the mobile app, they did such a great job with the mobile app. It's like me, I go in, when I ordered on my app, I go in, I grab it, I walk out.
Yeah.
So they're doing things, they're still doing the app, but they're doing things in the store. Like if you come in the store and order like a regular coffee,
You get free refills now.
get free refills.
Yeah.
Right. So they're actually doing
Yeah.
promotions now to reestablish that third place so that people will sit and stay a while, because they realized they were losing. But there was interesting, when we did the on-site in Huntington Beach last year, there was a Starbucks right up the street. They didn't have, it was a mobile store.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They didn't even have, they had a couple of tables outside, but it wasn't nice enough to sit outside, but they had no seating inside at all.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting, but that's, you know, because thinking that, it's like, if you did, like to your point, Josh, so that's almost like, I don't know what I was gonna say. That thought just.
Well, it's just bigger business moves because they're
Yeah.
dealing on a different scale of things, right?
Yeah.
Side note, the mobile store versus sit down store, that segmentation, I think, might be a thing that happens. We see that with some Tim Hortons in Canada are starting to do
Yeah,
that. The
some
best
have.
example in Canada on the West Coast is called Triple O's and White Spot. White Spot is the brand, which is the restaurant, which is like family style restaurant, go in and sit down. Triple O's only sells their burgers, fries, and shakes, and they're attached to Esso gas stations. So when they made that move, they quadrupled their revenue because now they're slinging more burgers than ever, like a fast food joint, and their burgers are actually very good, in my opinion.
I didn't know that
But
they were spot burgers.
those are White Spot burgers, but the
Oh.
legendary White Spot burger. But the White Spot still exists. So every city would have like one White Spot and then 10 Triple O's. Their total locations across the city are through the roof without them investing in the huge restaurant build out that's there. And the restaurant is for the sit down third space restaurant family birthday thing.
You just
And the
want to grab
Triple
your
O's is
burger.
like just fucking grab your burger. And they've
Get your
separated
gas,
them
grab your burger.
completely.
Yeah.
And they
It's
made
markets.
they made a very conscious decision to do that because they tested this, instead of adding a quick window or a drive-through window on the existing restaurants like a McDonald's, they said, no, that'll debrand us because we're the family sit-down place, but we want to move more burgers. Separate thing under a slightly separate brand. It's the same exact product, same brand.
Well, this was, and you should say that because there's it's called Skyline Chili, which is really popular in the Midwest here. And everybody always raved about them. And that's like, okay, so I was like not impressed at all. But partly it was because they did that combination. They used to be like the family sit down, and then now they have the drive through. When I noticed when we were there, now granted, this was not too long out of the pandemic, they were doing a huge business at the window and not so much in the, so the people that were there sitting down, we were like, hello.
Right.
It took forever to get served.
No service.
They were focused on all the people in the drive-through.
Yeah.
And, you know, I saw other people getting upset with our server, but I didn't, you know, I felt bad for her. I was mad at management because this woman was busting her ass, but she was the only one working the floor.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough.
It's rough. If anybody's ever been in service and it's like, that's rough. So, you know, that's the other thing about that. Just now we're really way off in the weeds.
For anyone listening, the reason we discuss this stuff and why I'm always like studying this and looking at it, and I'm super fascinated by it, is this directly relates to a yoga studio, a Pilates studio, a HIIT gym, a therapy. It's all the same thing. It's what's normal culturally and how things move. And you get to see by living vicariously through the image of the other business, like what impact certain things have. And it lets you have a more critical thinking mindset and decision making. If you're just signing people into a yoga class, right now today, you don't need front desk. You don't need a desk at all. There's different apps you can use. People can self-sign in. You don't need any of that. But then is that appropriate, good customer service, interaction, community building? It's lesser so. That might be okay if that's consciously your decision. You're like, I'm sacrificing that element. I don't want to do that. I want smaller square footage and I want to just have people sign in and I'm just going to teach them bomb yoga classes and that's it. Then you could go that direction. On the other hand, and related to all this too, it's like the Starbucks app thing. It's what we were saying. If you buy credits or pre-buy classes or you have a membership, then like, I'm going to participate with you. And as long as you don't piss me off and as long as I'm actually utilizing it and as long as whatever, like the reason you wouldn't renew or turn off your auto pay or put more money on your account in the Starbucks app is because you decide you're not going to buy Starbucks anymore because you move somewhere there's no Starbucks or because you don't like it and there's a local place that you prefer to go there instead. Then you would make the switch. But those are reasonable reasons.
I tried to turn
Otherwise,
off my
they've got
Starbucks
you.
app, but I just couldn't do it. I tried, but I just
But
couldn't do it.
but you see the point, like yoga studio, same thing. Why are we trying to sell someone a membership for X times per month or unlimited or inviting them in or an intro or whatever else? Because that's the gateway to them having a habitual yoga practice. And the real conversation that matters isn't the membership. It's the what are you getting out of your practice and how do I help you achieve that?
The product.
And step one of achieving that is you got to come in and you got to come back tomorrow. That's it.
And for that, you've got to have a great product, which I think we can pick that up next week, because we had a whole conversation before this about product. And if you think your product is just your yoga class, well, my friends, I'm teeing this up for next week. Well, my friends, tune in next week, because we're going to talk about what is an actual yoga product. How did you like that, Josh? I thought that was sort of brilliant.
That's a good one.
Is that
That's
a
a
good
wrap.
one? That's a
All
wrap.
right, well,
Weekly
make
Roundup
sure
isn't.
you remember that for next week, Terry.
I will. I'm going
And
to write it down.
all right,
We're
then that's a
definitely
wrap
gonna
on
forget.
this week's Weekly Roundup. Listen live every Thursday morning on Facebook, or subscribe to Studio Cult TV on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening from. See you next week.
Peace.
Bye.